How are we doing today? It is Doug with 2 Plus Stuff here for our normal Friday stream as we sit, hang out, talk hobby, and that kind of stuff. If you're new to the show, basically this is my way to hang out with people in the UK, because frankly this is the only time that I get to really hang out with you guys in terms of time zone differences and that kind of stuff. So this is more of a listening thing than it is like a visual, I have stuff to show you. There's going to be a little bit stuff like that in the news, but for the most part, just go ahead, pull up some models and have a seat. We're going to sit, chat, relax. We'll start off always in these little intros. Just give me a sound check, make sure everything's working fine. My mic was being a little finicky this morning, so let me know if you can hear me okay. But then we're going to move into topics like hobby progress that I've been doing, talk about news with Games Workshop, and then we have a main topic for today, which is comparing the fantasy tropes from Warhammer Fantasy Battles, which are very Tolkien-esque, and comparing them to the new intellectual properties that Games Workshop has produced, like, comparing dwarfs in the old world to fire slayers or carriage and overlords now. And so that is pretty much this show today. Okay, looks like we got some positive feedback there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move right along here. And we're always kicking this stuff off with hobby progress. So forgive the weird angle of the camera. That got bumped sometime in between my testing. It has been a productive week for 2 Plus Stuff. So we got, if you guys don't know, I received a whole bunch of Beasts of Chaos, round 2, apparently. And I wanted to make a Pestilent Throng. Now, these are specifically for a tournament list. As far as like friendly narrative play, I probably wouldn't go outside of Magkin of Nurgle, but I had an idea for a competitive list that features, of course, my Pusco Blight Lords that I love so stinking much, being aggressive and charging straight up to the enemy. And then the Pestilent Throng is a Beast of Chaos battalion that gives them all the Nurgle word. And between them and the Great Bray Shaman, they are exceptionally fast, and I can put huge blobs of infantry on objectives. Almost the entire list is battle line, so that matters for some objectives. I now have more heroes because Great Bray Shaman are cheap as chips. So yeah, I don't know, I'm real very good about it. So I'm gonna okay, you're about to watch how I move models in Age of Sigmar. Are you ready? And that's why I'll never win an event. In addition to that, I painted up this guy. This is a Varengard model. My buddy Jack over at Rerolling Ones asked me to do this. Basically, he's given one to a few of us and said, like, hey, can you paint this up? This way he has a big unit that's been painted by several people who all chipped in, and I had mine match my Nurgle stuff with that dark navy blue and the khaki colors and the kind of like more bronzy trim with some verdigris inside the edges there. So yeah, I like him. He is looking cool. He's looking mean. He's ready to be put on a base that Jack has, I hope. Basically, I did the exact same scheme that I did for my Nurgle, which I can compare you here. But the only thing that I realized, and I didn't realize it until I was like into the painting already, is that these guys, the skin actually functions to really break up the dark blue. Because I was looking at this guy, like, here's just the dude, and I was like, man, he looks very, like, not samey, that's not the word I'm trying to say, but like, he just doesn't, I don't know, certain colors don't pop like they do with the other guys, but I like him nonetheless. One cool thing that he does have to break up the color is on Varengard. It's like the armor plates are cracking apart, and so I put like fire and molten effects inside of there, since it's like a beast from hell steed type thing. And there's that. Now, I do got some other stuff hobby progress wise that I wanted to point out, and I'm gonna kick my extra stuff, we'll say extra credit, with a shout out. Friends, if you are looking for a way to help small businesses, okay? And I mean this. Our hobby industry is full of awesome people who frankly exist to serve us and get excited about the things that we're excited about. One of those is my good friend Dan at Tectonic Craft Studios. And we don't really have a sponsor to hobby sections, but by golly, he's the sponsor today. So we've been friends for a bit. I met him at Nova, super cool guy. And he does all kinds of fun artwork. So like there's this, which you can see on camera. It says Adepticant. He made that for me when Adepticon got canceled. I thought that was amazing. He also does MDF bases. So here we have some, it almost looks like, what's the word? Like a toolbox. I can't think of the actual material. But yeah, that kind of like metal with the texturing on it. Here we have some broken temple floors, that kind of stuff. And these are just meant to go right on top of your normal 25 mil base, and boom, you got a cool textured base. Now, the reason he actually sent me some stuff was twofold. One, if you are enjoying the Animosity campaign, cool, me too. I've been mostly reading, I haven't had a lot of time to contribute. He made these like very custom designed token markers for them, and they look absolutely stellar. I'm not sure how well they show up here, but if you go to the link in the description below, you can see them all zoomed in and pick out which ones you want. But that is not the main event. The main event is for Lumineth Realm Lord players. These are gapless movement trays, where this is completely like there's nothing there. There's an outline of where the unit bases go, but there's not actually a divider between them. Like they don't slot in. Instead, yeah, and this is a 0.1 inch, I don't know, measuring edge. So like they are the best bases, movement trays I've seen in terms of it's a 5-man squad. You charge them in. You're definitely within melee range. You can choose to do whatever you want with them. If you do something like this is the exact same concept for, again, like I said, Lumineth Realm Lord players are going to love this. Gapless stuff, they're scrunched together, and they are offset by 1. So if you don't know, Lumineth Realm Lords, they're spear guys. They can go, like, have, like, a super shield effect if they're within range of, 2 or more models from the same unit. And this allows you to basically pick one off here and make sure that you always have your bonus, because the way they're locked together, one model is always in relation to 2. So, I thought that was frickin' dope. And I wanted to give him a shout out. This is not a sponsored plug. He sent these because he's my friend and he knew I could use them. But go check his stuff out. You know what I mean? Just go help people who help the hobby. So that's Tectonic Craft Studios. Descriptions, link in the description down below. Oh yeah, we got a whole bunch of cool stuff here. We got these. Here's a 5-man one, which you can obviously, do something like that. If you like having the smaller bases where it's easier to pull, different sections off, that kind of thing. Lots of cool stuff. He's a fantastic artist. Some of his designs are like super, super interesting. Let's see. Cody in all caps, I got them. They look great. Yes, love it. Let's see. That's a great idea for a movement tray. 10 out of 10 for the design. You hear that, Dan? That's all about you, buddy. All right, and then lastly, for hobby progress, in addition to the painting that I've done, I got some reinforcements. So Tom Lyons, a friend of the show from Warhammer Weekly, hooked me up. He was clearing some stuff out of his closet, and I decided to take that opportunity to double down on my Nurgle. So I got myself a Lord of Plagues. Here is a Festus Leech Lord. We got 10 more Blight Kings. No, Plague Bears. Sorry, not Blight Kings. 10 more Plague Bears. Horticula Slimex, which is a model that I have wanted for a long time. It's one of those things that, like, because it was cheap and a friend was getting rid of it, I was like, I'll grab it. But for the most part, when I go into the Games Workshop store, I look at it and I'm like, I want this. But what I really want, if I'm being honest with myself, is his battalion, where he just like takes a crap load of Beasts of Chaos. And I'm going to be on Warhammer Weekly this week talking about Nurgle, and I just want to put that out there that, friends, come up with your best ways to make Beasts of Nurgle really good and throw them in the chat while we're live. I would love that. And then I got 3 sets of Plague Drones. Because it turns out they're good. For as much as I love the Puscoil Blight Lords, the Mortals on the Flies, I have never really given a chance to the Demons on the Flies. And someone was explaining to me, like, they were doing some math hammer and that kind of stuff, and it's like, in terms of killiness, they're far more effective. Whereas the Pasquale Blightlords are really good at what I use them for, which is more just gunking up the enemy and that kind of thing. So, it's a trade-off in terms of damage output and their function within the army. But yeah, I'm glad I have them. I can summon some in now, and I think that's just about it. Let's see. Looking at the chat. So in between sections in this show, I always pause and give the audience time to ask questions or, make comments, that kind of thing. So I'm going to open that up now before we jump into the news, because I got a lot of news this week. I don't know if you guys know that, but like stuff's happening. So we'll jump into that here in a second. So let me just take a look at the chat here. Let's see. Good. See you through at their kicking butt. Nice, awesome stuff. Yeah, let's see. Especially, when the spears are a pain. Yeah, Jacob, those spears for the three. Well, they're 4-inch long spears, but they literally come forward off the model 3 inches, which is of course their range in the game. They are unwieldy. I do believe, as much as I love Games Workshop models, there's something that other model companies understand that they don't, which is they are also not just a model, they're something else. So for example, the guys who make Gundam stuff, right? They understand that their consumers want posability and special effects and that kind of stuff, and so they make products that are posable and movable and arms are detachable and things like that. Whereas with Games Workshop stuff, it's like y'all remember, we're supposed to transport these to stores or hobby clubs or just store them anywhere, and so they're not always in a nice pristine display case, so it's they're gonna shatter. Those spears are not long for this world. It's that kind of stuff. It was not just the spears on the Lumineth. I think the first time I was like, do they even realize we use these in a game, was the Griff Charger dudes, right? Griff Chargers? Paladors, that's what they are, for Stormcast, when he has the javelin kind of out like this and the spear comes all the way forward and all the way back, but it's far from the core of the model, so it's any amount of leverage will snap that thing in half. Let's see. Buddha Queen, love the name by the way, says, "Hey Doug, starting a Maggotkin of Nurgle army. I have 2 units of Blight Kings. What other investments should I make next?" If all you have is 2 units of Blight Kings, I would say that honestly, what I would suggest you do is pick up a start collecting box of Nurgle, to be honest with you. You'll get a Lord of Blights, because you need a hero, and you get another unit of Blight Kings. That's 3, which means you can make the Blight Cyst Battalion at its minimum. And you get a unit of Pasquale Blightlords, which you don't have to use, but people, you can sell them online if you really don't like them. That kind of thing. So that's what I would suggest, because it gets you a hero, another unit, you start making the battalion, and you can get some money back even if you don't like the other models. I tend, when people say I want to start an army, I tend to point people towards battalions first, and the only reason I say that, and I don't say it for every army, is just that they let you experience the game in a new way. It seems very cohesive. It gives you some kind of framework for how to think about army building without being restrictive in a huge way. Most battalions are pretty fun. They're meant to be narrative on some level, whether or not they're effective or good or anything like that, I don't really care, but that's typically what I point people towards. So yeah, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna move right on. We're gonna talk some news, my friends. Let me pull up here. All right, so as always, I bring us to the Warhammer community main page, and just recapping the news that came out from the last week. Now, there wasn't a lot of AOS specific news, however, we're gonna work on that. Hey Doug, do you know there's a typo? Yes, I do. I am gonna work on that this weekend. I'm gonna redo the picture thing. Thank you so much, though. Yeah, someone pointed it out to me last week, and I was like, dadgummit, and so I put it on my to-do list. Thank you, though. All right, so we're gonna talk about the first one, which I thought was really, really cool. Okay, now I saw this, I was like, what the heck am I looking at? Question, who's cooler, Korn or Slaanesh? Korn, by a mile. What I'm talking about here is for 40k, they added a map, and I actually brought it up on another tab. And this is incredible, and it's something that I would like to see for AOS. I'm not sure how they would do that when it comes to like the realms per se, but this is a map of the the galaxy in 40K. Here we have Terra off to the side. That's us, and if you look at the bottom here, you can see all the different faction symbols. Well, if you click on them, we'll go to let's pick an alien one, orcs. That same map has a different overlay with where the orcs are. And you can kind of put together, here's Genestealer cult infestations, chaos marines, chaos demons, all this kinds of stuff. I absolutely love it. The custodes are just like, we're from Earth. Like Will Smith, Independence Day, welcome to Earth style. That's a custode punching someone in the face. But I thought that was just the coolest flippin' thing. Thanks again for the spotlight shout out. Oh yeah, you're absolutely welcome, Jacob. No problem. Just making sure there's another one with the chat. Okay, all right. So anyway, this is just a small thing. I just wanted to point it out because first of all, someone put a heck of a lot of work into this, and it's cool as all get out. Here's the Tyranid tendrils coming into our galaxy. Are you kidding me? This is so cool looking. Anyway, that's it for that news. Necromunda got a little bit of love here, which I always, I like my Necromunda. I love it. I love it. And this is a new terrain set coming with balconies, walkways, looks like a water tower type thing, and of course, like a watchtower. I don't think I'm going to grab it, mainly because I don't want to build it, and I don't want to stretch my friendship with my good friend Ben, who built the last, like the big box of terrain that I got from whatever that big set was. I don't want to, strain that friendship. I say that jokingly. Yeah, I know it's cool. It is really cool. I will say that. It's funny because I feel like the walkways match the existing terrain, but the doors and these little like bottom panels where it's almost like a barricade, I'm not sure they do. And so I'm a little bit perplexed as to that, but I'm positive that they slot right in. Like, they've been doing really good about making sure all their terrain like is compatible, you know what I mean, with each other. So yeah, I don't know, it's pretty cool. Let's see. Alright, chat still good, so we're gonna move right on. Next article here, this actually is an Age of Sigmar thing. We got a couple Age of Sigmar things this week, which was a nice a welcome reprieve. So they're giving us a preview of the next White Dwarf that's coming in the mail. And they're talking about the Squigalanche. So if you don't know, basically, what do they call it? What's it called? The Tome Celestial. That's what it's called. The Tome Celestial is the section in the White Dwarfs where they introduce, like, fun thematic rules, or they take a second to really highlight the lore behind something, or, introduce new stuff. It's kind of their way of bolting on fun things to Age of Sigmar in kind of a lighthearted way, and I really do like it. I wish more people would play it, and I wish that they would give points to these battalions, but for what it is, I like it. What is the Squigalanche? And so it's basically talking about, what is the idea behind a Squigalanche? Taming massive amounts of squigs for grots to ride them. And then the actual thing is about the Jaws of Mork. Now, I'm probably going to do a dedicated video to the Jaws of Mork because there usually is enough lore in these White Dwarfs to give me some fodder for a video. So I won't go into detail about their story now. However, they do have a battalion, which I like. And I think it's kind of what, frankly, Gloomspite needs, or at least the Squigalanche needs. How about that? I think that's pretty fair to say. And that is, add one to the damage characteristics of Fang-Filled Gob, Massive Fang-Filled Gob, and Huge Fang-Filled Gob weapons. So just the biting attack of the Squigs, okay? Across all of Squigdom. You add one to their damage if they made a charge move in the same turn. And of course, you have 2 to 3. Jaws of Mork is the name of the army here. Squig Hoppers or Boing Grot Bounders in any combination, and 0 to 1 Mangler Squigs, making this an extremely cheap battalion, right? Because at minimum, it's just 2 units of Squig dudes, which is great. It goes up to 3, and they can be pretty massive. in terms of individual unit size, and then you can get a Mangler Squig. That's the Moonjumper Stampede, not the Squigalanche. Now, if I'm not familiar, someone correct me in the chat here. Isn't the Squigalanche battalion like a super battalion that takes like 2 of these? Or am I making that up? Oh yeah. With another War Scroll battalion, the Moonbiter Squigalanche. Yes. Okay, so this is part of that thing. So I like it. The fact that you could have multiple units that all get +1 on the charge, +1 damage, that is to say, I think are awesome. Like the thing with Gloomspite, at least in my opinion, from the games that I have seen, is they are really good at debuffs. We have a guy here who locally, Jack played against him a few times, runs Gloomspite Gits. He's been a Grot fan since Fantasy Battles, and basically he just kind of floods the board with netters to give you a -1 to hit kind of a thing. And there's a lot of debuffs that make it really hard to wipe out his blocks of units. So if he gets onto an objective, that's his win condition. You know what I mean? In terms of like a tournament style thing, because they don't have a lot of bite, and that's really what it comes down to. There were a lot of lists centered around how can we take like Spiderfang, who have the potential to do mortal wounds, and turn that up to 11 and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think a lot of people just really like Moon Clan Grots, specifically like that 1/3 of the book. And that did not have a lot of bite per se. And so this, I think, really does add at least to a small portion. I think the book as a whole needs more, but to an extent, I think it adds something fun and unique. So I'm happy about that. If you are a Gloomspite Git player, rejoice, my friend. We're going to move right along here. We're talking new Warband War Scrolls. That was a mouthful. For the 2 new... I'm going to blow these up on their own because I want to look at them. These are the new Warbands from Warhammer Underworlds. And I find them to be super interesting. So this one looks absolutely incredible. You get a new hero option off by herself. I can totally see these being used a lot for conversions to make heroes and that kind of stuff. Let's see. Hans, I'll get to your question when we switch between topics here. But for the new stuff, yeah. So I like this warband quite a bit. We're going to go to the Orc one. These guys look awesome. I love this guy over here on the left with like the bird head helmet that he's got rocking. I think that is quite possibly the coolest brute that's ever existed. The other two look very, very, I'm going to say traditional. I don't really quite know the right word I want to use there, but they look like brutes. If someone was like, hey, we made a brute that's actually running, I'd be like, this is exactly what it looks like. But if you said to me like, we made the coolest brute in the world, this is what it looks like over here on the left. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy's rocking. Now let's talk about some rules. Now, to be honest, most of the Warhammer Underworlds warbands, they're not fantastic in actual Age of Sigmar. And I don't really begrudge that. They just give you more reasons to have this model. But it's not like, I don't want these guys coming in and sweeping the world. There was a lot of debate about the Beasts of Chaos warband because it does some really cool stuff. The Beasts of Chaos one, basically the dude has a spell where you pick an enemy and everyone gets bonuses to hit that enemy, which back before Blight Kings had their exploding 6s on unmodified 6s means you could do d6 hits just for hitting on a 5-up, which was amazing for like 3 months until they came out with the FAQ and they were like, oh yeah, we forgot about that book. But it's fair because not only did they switch Blight Kings to unmodified 6s, but then they give Pasquale Blight Lords the same ability, which they didn't have before. So she does all the normal stuff that a priestess does as far as like the witch brew and that kind of thing. She really is a fantastic like sub in if you need a model for that. And her little cohort does my favorite thing, the thing that I believe all warbands should do if they're coming from Underworlds, and that is roll a dice before you allocate a wound to insert hero of that warband. on a 4-up, one of these guys dies first. And I like that. I love when, you get a hero that's useful, right? I mean, maybe they're not outstanding, but then everything else in the warband exists to deliver them so that they can actually do what they want to do. And that is my favorite, I guess, design archetype. I guess, I don't know what to call that, for Underworld's warbands that go into AOS, because you're taking them essentially for the hero, right? You buy the hero and then you get the rest of the unit for free. So I like when the rest of the unit exists to make sure that you get to have fun with the hero you just paid points for. That to me is a win. The Beast of Chaos one does it. So does the Nurgle one, which actually, come to think of it, I need to go grab. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot to be said for punkin' wounds for somebody. Because, for example, with the Nurgle one, that Nurgle Priestess is really not any different than a normal Nurgle Wizard, like specifically from the Rotbringer Wizard type. They have this very, very close range spell where they basically vomit mortal wounds on you, and that's literally what they do at the description of the spell. But the normal wizard, the sorcerer, will never actually make it that close, because he can just get picked off really, really easily. Whereas now you have this chunky lady, Flyblown or whatever her name is, being escorted by 2 Blight Kings who can shrug wounds for her. Now she can actually get there and use the ability. So that was a tangent to say I need to go buy some more models. No, it was a tangent to say that I like that as a design idea for Underworld's warband. So moving into the Brutes one. Now this is a very simple war scroll, and I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever wondered what it's like to see 3 brutes standing around waiting for a bus? That's what this war scroll is. It is so unenthusiastic. It literally is just 3 brutes. Cool. I love it. And basically, it really is. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's just 3 brutes. They like to duff up the big things, which is awesome. And their big thing is hunting monsters, which makes sense because they're in Peacegrave, which, monsters and Gur is really the theme of that. The first time an enemy monster is destroyed by an attack made with this unit, add 1 to the wound rolls for the rest of the battle. So that is awesome. So they're going to be wounding on 2s if this 3-man unit of brutes who are just chilling can kill a monster. Like I said, waiting for the bus. They're just chilling. They're just there, and they're cool. They're awesome. The models are amazing. I want that bird-headed one. But I look at this and I just go, wow, that is the most beautiful, elegant blood tithe point I have ever seen. So anyway, so I'm looking at this, and we're going to move back here. And this is a big article that came out, I believe it was yesterday. Time means nothing anymore in the Corona world, so I've lost all sense of time. Basically, they're going to do some reboxing of Warhammer stuff, because you got to keep it fresh, got to keep changing that product every 2 years, and make people have minor heart attacks whenever something goes out of stock. That kind of stuff. That's really important to their business model. So, talking about this, all factions are getting new codexes, and it's interesting is they do point out that big changes are happening to the way that codexes are, and this is actually why I wanted to talk about this as far as news goes, because I do have a tie into AOS. I'm reading a line here. The upcoming range of codexes will offer so much more than an update of the datasheets in the Battleforged rules. There'll be loads of brand new content to look forward to, such as expansive Crusade rules that are unique to that faction. Now, that would be the equivalent of getting a Path to Glory section in a Age of Sigmar battle tome, okay? Which I'm all for. I love it. What I want to see out of 40k codexes is what we get in battle tomes. Quite frankly, you get a cool description of the army, why you should play it. But I love the painting guides and the history section. And yeah, the Path to Glory thing is not something we use enough. I did a whole video about that. But the truth is, those things matter to a lot of people. I mean, just having new ways to play your army. When I look at a 40k codex now, it looks like a D&D rulebook, which is it's a lot of information, but when I look at a battle tome, I feel very invested in that army. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably why I buy every army I do a lore review on, is because these books are so stinking good. When I look at the Maggotkin of Nurgle book, and I only point that out because it's sitting right beside me, like, first of all, it's big, it's thick, it's jam-packed with art. It's got a whole bunch of stuff on the background of each unit, which 40k ones don't, because, and I think part of that's because they have so many models for 40k that they just can't reasonably talk about them in any kind of depth. But you get the painting section and some really great artwork of, like, you know, just them standing around being models and looking good. So, I don't know. It's a big deal. So this is a big article. Beyond that, and the reboxing, they went ahead and just previewed some of the rules. Now, 40k is in a really weird place, and this is why I haven't really engaged with it, is because they have a new edition, and all the codexes that exist work for it. Like, they do work without any problems. However, they're giving us information for what the game is going to be like in October, when the new codexes start rolling out. And of course, they're starting with Space Marines and Necrons, because those are what comes in the core set. And I don't quite... Like, it's just a weird space to be in. You know what I mean? Like, for right now, it's just like, I don't really want to invest in anything. And so what they did here was they dumped a whole bunch of rules changes that are to come in the future. And so you got stuff like heavy bolters with their heavy machine guns doing a lot more. Flamethrowers are now awesome. Melta weapons, which is just a different kind of weapon. How Space Marines work in combat, that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you've ever watched a Spanish soap opera on Telemundo, that is how I am to 40k right now. Like, I'm seeing their community, rebel, oh, I'm so mad about this, why should I have to wait, this app is garbage, why did I spend this much money on Indomitus if I can't even use these new models, you know, and their cool new abilities until October and all that stuff. And it's like watching a Spanish soap opera in the sense that I know people are mad, and I know there's a lot of emotion happening, but I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, like, where it's like, I haven't played 40k enough to understand the difference between this and this. If they have a rules comparison of old and new. And so it's just like, I don't know what y'all are mad about. I even had to ask Shu over Erling once, because there's one about, plasma weapons. So if you don't know, in plasma stuff, if you roll a 1, you blow up. It's just kind of like the risk-reward type thing. It's a great weapon, you can supercharge it, but if you supercharge it, you put yourself in danger. And I was like, if you roll a 1, you blow up. I was like, hasn't that always been the rule? And Shu had to remind me, he's like, no. Like, that's a rule in AOS. 40k, they're now introducing the idea of the unmodified ones in terms of their shooting and weapons and getting that specific. I was like, oh, okay. So that's kind of how I feel about it, where you're just like, I get it. I get that there's a lot of strong emotion, but I don't understand any of this. So, and then I scrolled to the bottom, and they said that all Marine equivalents, so that does include Chaos Space Marine equivalents, are getting 2 wounds minimum. I assume Scouts will still be 1 wound for Space Marines, but all of these dudes are getting 2 wounds, which immediately made me go, man, wonder if I can trade off my Sisters of Battle and get my Death Guard. Get some Death Guard going, then I can have Nurgle in both games. And then it just occurred to me, I was like, I am a moron. I am falling for this hook, line, and sinker. I'm looking at, the community all whiny and angry, and I'm just looking at this going, oh, that green guy's cool. So I just like that. So, yeah. Oh, we got a donation. Thank you so much, Matthias. That means the world to me, buddy. Oh, you're so awesome. Thank you. And now this pretty much ends up my news section. So I'm going to leave the show right here. If you have a question or something you want to comment on, Matthias, you have the reins. If you want to pick a subject, that's my deal I always make with the little chat bot that says if you give a donation, you get to choose. Does anyone have any comments about the news? And we talked about the Underworld's warbands and the 40k changes, that kind of stuff. I'm very interested to know what you guys think. There was a question earlier. Let me see if I can find it. What was that guy's name? Hans. Hey, Doug, what do you think about 3D printing? I think it's great so long as you don't steal any intellectual properties. If somebody makes a file that says this is inspired by, a 40K vehicle, and it's clearly not that vehicle, like, say they make a different tank, right? It's not the Lehman Russ, but it's a different tank. Big thumbs up. Yeah, do whatever you want, man. That's awesome. It is the future. It is the future. I don't know how else to say that. But you lose me when someone makes a copy or a file that is a carbon copy of something else. And I'm like, that's not cool because an artist put their mind to that. If you make your own tank, you're the artist. Do whatever you want. Let's see. Sadly, no more Death Company for me. 8th ruin then for me. Oh, sad day. In the 40K fandom, everyone angry and screaming. That's just kind of what it seems like. And honestly, like, for as excited as I was about 40K on the lead up to 9th, the breaks have never hit harder in my life as far as enthusiasm goes because the game's just in such a weird place. And I fully expect that has everything to do with COVID-19. Like, I mean, you know what I mean, in terms of like their distribution and their production and that kind of stuff. So it's not something that I'm mad about at all. This whole year's theme is being flexible, right? And I'm totally cool with being flexible. It's more just this is a weird in between period, and the people who are really passionate are like really freaking passionate about it. And I don't need to be a baby seal to get clubbed. I don't need to walk in and be like every poor sap who walked into Age of Sigmar forums before the game had points and be like, hey guys, these models are really cool. And then a bunch of grizzled veterans be like, you're a dirt person. That's pretty much what it feels like to interact with anything with a really intense 40K group right now. AOS fandom, calm and relaxed tea time. That's exactly how I perceive it. Let's see. News-wise, this is great for Chaos Space Marines and super dope for the old Baby Marines. Absolutely, yeah. 2 wounds each is a huge game changer. And honestly, I never would have thought they would have gone and retroactively added a 2nd wound to the old Marines. I thought that was their lot in life. You are one wound bros. And they were like, actually, we're just going to phase out the models over time. Like, nothing's been announced. But I mean, like, we'll let you play the way that the game is meant to function with the models you already own. And eventually we can cycle them out. But for right now, we don't want to pressure you to have to go buy all Primaires. That's awesome. That's great. Let's see. Okay, Rouse has not picked a topic. Yes, but for Plague Marines and... what are the blue ones? 1,000 Suns. Those are both Chaos Space Marines. It's a great day. So, yeah. We're not going to get into 40K player bash. And I mean, they're not all competitive. There are awesome narrative gamers like my buddy Ben. I do find, in general, it is a harder community to get a narrative experience in. But, that does not reflect on the moral character of anybody. Okay, so Matthias came in with his topic he chose. Is there anything big you think is missing in Age of Sigmar, like factions, rules, Age of Sigmar side games, or anything like that? So my default answer is Path to Glory. I just did a video about that this last week or two or something like that. No, it was 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to put that to the side because I've already said it. But to answer your question, as far as anything else that I think is missing... missing. What is missing? I would love there to be more death factions. I don't even like I don't play any death armies. The closest I've ever come is at some point in my life I want to own a Flesh Eater Court army, but like I don't play any of them. But I want more death and destruction armies because those are two parts of the puzzle that I feel like just do not get enough love. I would love to see more factions with like large ships. So like what are they called? The Grots, the Scuzzbag Scuttlers, or whatever they're called, where they're like pirate grots. Yes, like I want more of those kinds of models with a lot of presence. And I feel like they're reaching a point where they've kind of begun to understand how to balance Carriage and Overlords because they're so unique amongst the game that I feel like, oh yeah, we can actually take this to the next level and expand upon it. So I would like that for Destruction. For Death stuff, I want Soul Blight. I want a pure vampire faction. I want Nagash to bring back Vlad von Karstein, make him Mortarch of the Blight or something like that, and have a whole army of vampires. That's my wish. I'm gonna take a hot sip of coffee here. So anyway, I don't know where I made that up. Mortarch of the Blight. GW, you can use that one for free. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're going to move into our main topic, and I'm just going to throw a picture up here. Again, as I said in the beginning, this is much more of a audio experience than it is as far as like, you know, having anything to actually show you. And so today, we're going to chat about our main topic, which comes from John Barmore, who is a patron over on Patreon. Thank you so much, John. All of my patrons and Jay from Discount Games Inc., who supports the channel as a sponsor, his link is down below. You guys, this is life-changing stuff because come November, we're likely going to be moving to Iowa, and I can actually do this full-time. So it is truly, truly life-changing. Thank you so much. But John had a question that he wanted us to discuss, and that is, what about discussing how, quote-unquote, successful, lore-wise, the alternate takes on classic Tolkien races has been? So, for example, Carriage and Overlords Fire Slayers instead of dwarves, or Deepkin, you know, Realm Lords, Daughters of Cain instead of elves, that kind of thing. And so I thought that was a really cool topic. Am I qualified to talk on it? Absolutely not, because I didn't play Fantasy Battles for too long. But yeah. So anyway, I think the key to this conversation, based on his question, is defining the word successful. Okay, he even put it in quotes because it is sort of a hard word to assess here. Again, everything we're going to talk about is opinion. Okay, it's just straight up opinion, and you can disagree. And if you do so, do it politely and put it in the chat, or not, well, the chat as well, but comments down below. I would love to pin it so we can have an awesome dialogue about it. So, as far as successful, the Google definition of the word successful means it accomplishes its aim or purpose. And so when we talk about why did we split, you know, dwarves into fire slayers and Carriage and Overlords and all these kinds of things and all the Cities of Sigmar stuff, what was the aim of that? And I believe that it has two purposes. One is to separate themselves enough from traditional or Tolkien-esque fantasy for IP reasons, intellectual property. They can actually say, hey, you're copyright infringing and that kind of stuff, which people gawk at when GW did it because it initially came from a lawsuit against Chapter House Studios, who was making like Tyranid stuff. And they were stealing the intellectual property. And so the company made a shift to be like, no, we need to start creating things that we can protect. And as much as people scoffed at that idea, it is very important to the structure of the business and making sure that they can stay in business. The way they did it, not great with that lawsuit, not great at all, but it is a goal. They needed to have something that they can claim, and you can't really claim dwarfs. You know what I mean? Like they're just part of our mythos. It just is what it is. So I think that was definitely part of it, separating themselves to create an intellectual property. And secondly, and I think this was also important, was to give their artists wider design space to create cool models. And this goes from the individual model level to the entire army theme level. And when I say like the individual model, if you look at a Saurus warrior, he's like halfway in the fetal position because his arms are all locked up close, because fantasy battle models used to be very, very regimented. You know, unless you were a skirmish unit, which was a whole rule set in that game where you could spread out, they were in those little brick formations all the time. And so models had to kind of exist in that tiny space. Whereas now, I mean, the moment the first Age of Sigmar starter dropped and you've got Blood Reavers who are like, bah! You know, fully stretched out, you know, I don't know, spread eagle charging headlong into the enemy. We knew that this was a very different opportunity for those artists to create much more dynamic models. And I do believe that was a very intentional part of breaking away from traditional stuff, is just having design space, both physically in terms of how the game functions and how models need to be able to fit, but then also just, I want to make a cool, weird thing. You know what I mean? That kind of design space to break out of the Tolkien-esque stuff. That is the definition I'm going to be using in terms of seeing if things are successful. That's what we're going to use. Does it create its own IP that Games Workshop can protect its resources and make sure that it can pay its artists? And secondly, did it achieve the goal of giving us new design space to really explore the mortal realms and really kind of get a sense of this new, different setting? Okay. And one thing I'm going to say here at the top, I'm not going to be talking about the Cities of Sigmar stuff. I only say that because those are holdovers from the old design stuff. They did change the names, but nothing about them is terribly IP protected, if you know what I mean. Like, they could redo the entire line, and I hope they do at some point. But the truth is, right now, it's kind of a hodgepodge. So I'm going to stick to the things where, like, they created an original faction based on something else. I think we can all, like, agree that that's not a bad idea. So we're gonna tackle these one by one. We're gonna start off talking about dwarves, okay, or Duarden. I found an old Warhammer like role-playing game resource thing that kind of went through the background of the dwarfs and that kind of stuff, and it was really, really interesting to read like the background stuff. And so I wanted to talk about Fire Slayers and Carriage Overlords, what they have in common with more Tolkien-esque, that kind of thing. You know, I think Jacob says high fantasy instead of the heroic fantasy that AOS is. And so kind of compare and contrast how they are similar and how they're different. So I would say we're going to start with Fire Slayers. I would say Fire Slayers are probably the most, of all the Dwarven they have that are original, you know, between them and Carriage Overlords, they are the most old world like dwarves Duarden. Okay, they follow the path of existing deities that were written about in the fantasy battles. So Grimnir, because it used to be Grugni, Grimnir, and Valea, but they deleted her because of some weird, I don't know, Twilight love triangle thing going on. I assume. I don't know. I want her to come back. That'd be awesome. We need more female goddesses. A lot of the runes depicted on the Fire Slayer skins and the magma forge, that kind of stuff, are direct pulls from runes that were used in the old world. And I like that. You know, there's a lot of visual homages to the old world, that kind of stuff. They look like a race that's just continued to evolve along a very specific path. Okay. Both of them, the Old World Dwarves and Fire Slayers, are all about clans and family. The familial bond is super important to them. They have long memories and great deeds being recorded in both of them. And that goes like, so dwarves from the Old World have like the Book of Grudges. Okay. It's a very iconic thing of recording all the things that are wrong in the world. And we're going to someday, at some point, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to punch that guy in the face for ruining things. The Fire Slayers do something kind of similar in terms of like remembering important things. If you know the banner bearer dude, he actually like learns the entire history of his clan and inscribes it on the back of that banner, and he recites it from memory every time they go to fight. It's really cool. So I like that kind of tie-in. Like they have a whole focus on like, you know, heritage and family and deeds that we've done, and they're very historical based. I like that. They have a great reverence for the past. They also have a great reverence for the dead, whereas, you know, dwarfs in the old world, there were a few scenes in the end times that I loved where it seemed like the dwarven kings and leaders were like literally sad and depressed about all of their friends and family dying, which is just not something you see a lot in Warhammer books, because a lot of it's like, you know, bolter porn is kind of the thing they call it in 40k, where it's just action for action's sake and no one really cares about the deaths. There was a lot of that too. So, yeah. So they have great reverence for the dead and avenging them. Now, as far as where the faction begins to break away from traditional stuff, I would say that there is a bigger focus on patriarchy. Now, the dwarves in the old world, they did have male leaders in terms of like, he's the king, whatever like that. But with Fire Slayers, it is literally a family lineage. The new magma holds of Fire Slayers are born because the rune lord dies, and his sons need to figure out who replaces him if he didn't name an heir. If one of them doesn't like who was chosen, he'll split off into a splinter group and he'll start that with his family and a few clans that went with him. So it really, really is a very patriarchal society. It's still based on family and clan, but it's just taken to a bigger extreme when it's like, no, like this family's in charge. Specifically, this family is in charge. I think that is a notable departure in terms of government, I guess we could say. Government. They definitely, with Fire Slayers, went more into the fiery zealot angle. Whereas the normal dwarves, they had their own society, they had technology, they had history and all this kinds of stuff. They had reverence for their deities, but it wasn't like their core reason to exist. Whereas for Fire Slayers, everything they do is all about this like hidden secondary mission to get Urgold, to reconstruct Grimnir. And so the motivations are a little bit different and much more intense, much more emotional than the normal dwarves. And I like that, quite frankly. They kind of bolt on zealotness, you know what I mean? Like a fiery passion of like, this is why we need to do XYZ in a story. Now, beyond that, they're still greedy, like the old world dwarves. They love to dig and plunder and mine and great wealth and that kind of stuff. But there's more emotion behind it because now you've added the layer of like your god is in the resource that you're trying to capture. So I don't know. Let's see. Next up, for stuff that I think is different, they took a popular aesthetic within the Dwarven army and just blew it up. Okay, like magnified it. When I say blew it up, they took the Slayer models and were like, "What if we just had a whole army of those guys?" And they just, typed in enhance until it became the Fire Slayers. And so we're going to talk about real quickly, was the Fire Slayer army successful in terms of splitting off from traditional dwarves? Remember, our definition of successful here is they secured a new IP so they can keep themselves in business and not get sued or sue others, or at least have a reason to, protect their interests. And did they give the artists wide design space, and was that space used? So let's talk about that. I think Fire Slayers are largely a win. Largely. They reuse assets quite a bit in terms of like the runes and the overall aesthetic of Slayer models. Their deity Grimnir is mentioned before. Like if you know dwarves, there's a lot of things here that are very, very familiar, and that's wonderful for drawing people in. But they do have a lot of things like new names, right? And new names and headdresses and weapon types and that kind of stuff that is absolutely copyright protectable. Okay, and I think that's super important. Jack says, question, were Fire Slayers a thing before Grimnir broke apart into a billion chunks, or did him breaking apart lead to them? My understanding is that him breaking apart led to them. That they would have been faithful servants before, but then when he shattered, then they became like super intense. We got to get them together, and that's what kind of jump started the going out and reclaiming parts of him. I don't know if they were doing that beforehand. There's not a whole lot of history on them because it seems like the day he broke apart was the foundation of the faction. But yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Jack. But I don't think it's an entirely a win or successful by our own definition because did they use the free open design space that they had? Well, honestly, all the models kind of look the same with the exception of the Endless Spells and the Magma Droph and the Terrain Piece. which are kind of ancillary things, but like all of the actual units in the army are naked baby dude, beard, plus weapon. You know what I mean? Like no matter what unit you're talking about, it's the same configuration of those things. And so it's one of those, the art is very evocative. It's very bold, lots of red, intense colors, and their mission is super cool. But I think, I don't know, I just feel like they didn't quite land it, because some of the old world dwarf models they're just rad. You know what I mean? Like the dude being carried around with this big old book of grudges. I'm sorry, I don't know these guys' names. Everybody, I'm sorry. I mention every time I can that I'm not an old world guy. But that model and the cannons and the gunners and the gyrocopters, they all contributed to making the faction feel very diverse and fleshed out. That they are a faction of people who have very different interests and will pursue them, and collectively they become very dangerous. Whereas the Fire Slayers, it's a one-note kind of army in terms of visual aesthetic, but it's a cool as heck note. Like they are a awesome army. I loved the Fire Slayers when I had them. I know Brent uses them over on Reeling Once now, and like he does great with them. They're awesome. They are a really cool army, but I don't feel like they used all the design space that they carved out for themselves. So that's my personal opinion, and we'll rotate opinions here at the end about these. I'm going to take a break between dwarves and elves, and we'll talk about these. And now we're going to shift into Caradhran Overlords, and I got to speed up a little bit because I actually am recording a show with somebody else here in a little bit. So I think this is one of the earlier armies where we realized that Age of Sigmar could really go off the rails. Okay? Like in a good way. Like GW said, we know, everybody, that you like Dwarden, right? We know you like them short, people, but that's all they have in common. And so, going back to our sames and different list, what's same about them between Old World Dwarves and Caradhran Overlords? They still have an emphasis on craftsmanship, but it's taken in a new direction. They're still Dwarden, they still have long memories, and they are very litigious when it comes to the code, just as grudges and social rules and that kind of stuff with the Old World Dwarves were very, very stringent, very, very strict. As far as what's different, just about everything else, right? They don't have holds. Rank is earned by merit. They don't give a crap what family you're from. The emphasis on family is almost non-existent. It's about what you yourself can achieve and bring to the entire faction. You know what I mean? That's how they determine leadership and priorities and business owners and everything like that. They actively don't want gods to interact with them. So before we were talking about how Old World Dwarves had like Valea and Grugni and Grimnir, and these guys are like, screw all that. Please leave me alone. Please. Don't just, I have my boats, leave me alone. That's what the Caradhran Overlords say. And of course, their technological level is just very different. And because of all those things, I understand dwarf players from Fantasy Battles not liking them. Like, it was one of those ones where it's like, this was a radical departure in terms of models and culture and values and that kind of stuff. But that being said, if you read the story of the Caradhran Overlords, these changes absolutely make sense to me. Like, Caradhran Overlords have one of the most compelling backgrounds of any faction in the game. The intensity of Tzeentch's entry into the realms changed everything. If they stuck to those old ways that made us really, hit the nostalgia button in our head when it comes to dwarves, in this context, they'd be dead. Right? You had to adapt or die, and the Caradhran Overlords are the ones who adapted. There's tons of stories from the Cities of Sigmar book, as well as, I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, Fire Slayers and Caradhran Overlords, of Dwarden factions who stayed like Old World dwarves in their holds, right? Nothing's going to penetrate this mighty Karak, fortress. And of course, Chaos does just that. And so, adapt or die was the mantra. And I like that quite a bit, that even though they are such a radical departure, logically, this is an evolution. This is one way to survive. And that's exactly what they did. There could be many, but they chose this one. As far as the question, were they successful, right? Remember, I'm going to keep repeating it because, again, this is a very opinionated thing. Did they break apart and make an IP that they can secure for themselves? And did they actually use the design space that they created? And I think we can all agree they certainly made a unique intellectual property, because steampunk ether cloud hunting dwarves with guns is pretty unique to them. I haven't seen anything quite like that anywhere else. I don't think they captured enough of the old world feel for them to kind of be like a direct transition. Like if somebody was an old dwarf player and was like, I want to get an Age of Sigmar, what should I play? I'm not going to just say, oh, you like dwarves? Carriage and Overlords is your guy, right? I would probably point them to Fire Slayers because they're so much more relatable to that. If that's what they wanted. Obviously, lots of folks are like, I painted dwarves enough, I want to play something else. But if they wanted a dwarf faction, this one is a big departure. And as cool as I think they are, and I do think they're really stinking cool, they're a very different intellectual property. Yes, they can secure it in terms of legality, but I don't think it does quite a bit enough to reach back and pull in those old world folks. Now, as far as using the... Oh, sorry, everybody. I just dropped something. As far as they use the design space... Holy crap. Like, these models are incredible. They're incredible designed. They're super different. They took, a core idea of like, what about Sky Dwarves? And just blew it up into some of the coolest models that have existed from Games Workshop. I will say that I'm not a huge fan of like a 4-pound model balancing on a Q-tip clear flight stand. But by golly, they found... going back to our conversation from earlier about they forget that we have to like transport these things. That's up there for sure. I think if they took another shot right from the beginning in terms of like even just designing models, if they had turned the faction into being like the Sons of Grugny, kind of like returning from far away or something like that, and they incorporated more runes and that kind of thing, I think they could probably tie it in better to the old world stuff. But I absolutely see them as a win in terms of dwarves. We can secure this intellectual property, and we've taken that intellectual property into some really different design space and then let our artists go nuts. And they did. And it was really cool. So I'm going to pause there for a hot second because those are the two Dwarden factions, or full factions, I should say, and kind of open it up. What do you all think about the interpretations of Dwarden? I don't think it's a radical assertion to say that Fire Slayers are closer to old world dwarves than the dudes who fly in machines in the sky. So I'm going to open that up now. Go ahead and type it in. I'm going to look here. Looks like I missed some questions. Question from Wild Crazy Hungry. Do you think the resurging of older styles is ultimately bad for AOS? Personally, one of the things I love about AOS is the new faction styles. Do I think it's bad for AOS? No. Honestly, the only thing that's bad for AOS is people not buying models and books and stuff, because that means the game will go away because GW is not making any money. Everything else is personal taste, to be honest with you. I think I do firmly believe that Age of Sigmar would have been drastically different if Warhammer Total War achieved the kind of success it has now 7 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, if the game came out earlier and had that much of an intense following for the old world information, I don't know if we'd be here today, but by golly, I'm glad we are. So anyway, I think they do understand the importance of that intellectual property, the old world stuff, and they keep wanting to pull it in forward. Now, I frankly am quite like you in the sense that I like AOS stuff more. I want original AOS heroes. I don't want to keep bringing back people from the old world. I'm tired of it. I don't care about what they used to be. Every time I do a video on one of them, I get yelled at. It just is what it is. But yeah, no, it's not bad for the game. I don't think it's bad. Like I said, the only thing that's bad is Games Workshop going out of business. Let's see. Carrier Lords were my first AOS army. I wanted to do them, but Deepkin came out. Nice. Carrier Lords are a massive departure. I admit I wasn't keen on first, but have really grown on me. Yeah. Clancy Murphy, head over to Rerolling Ones and leave that in a comment below. He is working and driving. Okay. We're going to move on to elves. Oh, sorry. I was torn between KO and Fire Slayers. Had to go with the angry naked dragon riding dwarves. You chose right. I mean, in terms of personal taste, if we're just talking about what Doug likes, I prefer Fire Slayers over KO. Yes, all the naked baby dudes are the exact same. But that's, that's all there is to it. I don't know. I like them more as an army, the way they function and that kind of stuff. The homages they give to the old world. So, let's see. We're going to move into elves. Now, elves in the old world, renowned for arrogance, long lives, intelligence, martial prowess. They can give punches like a champion with the always strikes first rule in fantasy battles, but they can't really take a punch. They're not super great at staying alive. Lots of emphasis on magic and scholarship and tradition, and overall just kind of look like tall, lithe humanoids, right? And so we're going to kick it off with the new kids on the block, the Lumineth Realm Lords, because it's quick. And I'm just going to say all those things I said about old world old world elves. Just do a quick copy paste, Control C, Control V. They are also renowned for their arrogance and magic prowess and all that stuff, because that's exactly what Teclis wanted them to be. I mean, that is by design of their god. He pulled the souls out of Slaanesh. He said, I really liked high elves in the old world. And then he just made them. He just did it. So it's very, very interesting. Like that is one where the intent is copy paste. Now, from that point of their origin, they did evolve into something different, and that's where we get the Alarith and the cow helmet people, and they start rocking hammers, and they got mountain cows and that kind of stuff. But the core idea behind the army at its inception, both in the lore and the way that it was presented to us as consumers in the real world, was it's a copy paste of high elves. Whether or not they lived up to that is up to you. As far as, if the goal was a new intellectual property that can be protected and new model design space, I mean, they nailed it. They got clear references to old world stuff, models from that range that are also just like wild departures, like the cow guys, the Alarith, and all those kinds of things. Personally, I think they're a great fusion of new stuff, right? Like, I think if we were to, be like Cher and turn back time, and they saw the success of Total War, I think future fantasy battle armies would have looked like this. Extremely, I want to say conservative views on like they look like very traditional, not conservative, traditional views on elves and that kind of stuff, but with a little bit of a twist, like the bow that has 3 strings and, a 4-inch long spear, because on a 1.5 inch tall model, you know what I mean? Like the cavalry and stuff, it just looks very, I say copy paste. It's not a negative thing. It's just the aesthetic they went for, and I think they got it. And that'll lead kind of into Daughters of Cain, who are, again, largely the same. They took dark elves and magnified them out. I should say this very specific part of dark elves and blew them up into a full faction. They got a new backstory, of course, different motivations and that kind of stuff. They added in that heroic fantasy vibe with Morathi and her, the Melusai and the Kinyerai. But the core of the army is still old world stuff. It's stuff that's not a crazy departure from Tolkien-esque fantasy. Women who vow to shed blood as part of their dark rituals and offerings, but we're in a new setting and they needed new motivations and a new way to fit into the world. But ultimately, I think they're another great example of taking what existed, refreshing their context in the fantasy universe, and adding in a few new kits to kind of bridge the gap. You know what I mean? Like in terms of what makes these bikini-clad murderesses so cool in AOS. Oh, you have this whole backstory about like Marathi weaving this big deception, and she's stealing souls out of Slanesh's gullet and making monsters out of them because she's a monster on the inside. Like that's all individually very compelling, unique things that were added to an existing, very traditional Dark Elf story arc. So I think that's a win. And boom, it's like they're new and they make sense. They do make sense within the context of the world. Now, do people like how much sense they make when it comes to them being an Order faction? That's debatable. Personally, I don't mind it. You know, every Facebook group has an edgelord. Every Grand Alliance has a turd. It just be what it be. It don't always be like that, but sometimes it do. And, you know, they're a spoiler. They're out there just killing people, and sometimes they don't care who they kill. That's all there is to it. Now, not sure of how truly original the intellectual property is, because like Medusa and the Bat Ladies, they exist in Greek mythology. But, you know, if Games Workshop got a lawyer and they were like, yeah, I can defend this in court, and they got a stamp of approval, who am I to argue? Awesome. Good for them. I hope they protect their IP. But as for opening the faction up to new design space, this whole side quest, is what I'm going to call it, of the elven gods making new species allows for just that, and I think they fit in really well. Specifically to have Marathi there literally bridging the gap between crazy fantasy stuff and more traditional things by her actually being two things, right? That you have a Marathi model who looks like she was plucked out of the old world, and you have a Marathi model that looks like she should be fighting Godzilla. You know what I mean? But they're the same unit, but both in lore and in physical, like aesthetic and model and that kind of stuff, she bridges the gap between the crazier stuff and the more traditional things. And honestly, that is what I want from every single Age of Sigmar army that's not brand new. You know what I mean? If they took, for example, oh yeah, we'll just pick on this because I mentioned it earlier, thanks to Matthias's question about what I would want. Pluck Soul Blight out of Legions of Nagash, you know, give them a new battle tome and whatever. If you were to do that and then inject just a few kits to kind of bridge the gap between traditional vampires and what Age of Sigmar could offer them in terms of design space, what more do you want? That's incredible. Like I think Daughters of Cain are held back by the model, that the physical model kits that all your heroes are on the big throne thing. Like I think that's a huge barrier just in terms of purchasing power and that kind of stuff, and that's crummy. But in terms of taking an old world thing, blowing it up, making it fit into a new context, I think they are a slam dunk. Absolutely. 10 out of 10. Would get my soul or heart ripped out by them again. Okay, so last but not least is the Deepkin. So let's talk about this. This is actually the hardest one for me, if I'm being perfectly honest. Kept the personality of the high elves of old that we talked about, like traditional fantasy elves. They are, let me go back to my list here. I actually listed them out earlier. Renowned for their arrogance, long lives, intelligence, martial prowess. They can give punches but not take them. And there's a lot of emphasis on magic, scholarship, and tradition. And of course, they look like tall, lithe humanoids. That's what I said earlier. And Deepkin are exactly that. But none of those descriptions have anything to do with anything else. It's just them specifically. They don't have the same logical reasons for the flip, I'm calling it, like Carriage and Overlords does. So, for example, I mentioned before, like, yes, Carriage and Overlords are an incredibly radical departure from old world dwarves. However, I love their lore because I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, so this one kingdom of Dwarden that were, during the Age of Myth, very much like old world dwarves, were studying flying technology. Totally reasonable, because old world dwarves had gyrocopters. Like, I can follow that line of thought, and that they were able to escape chaos by just using technology they already had, and then they kept improving it over time, and now we have the Carriage and Overlords. Like, it's maybe not, it's one of the paths of survival that they took, and it's blossomed into a new faction that's very unique. With Deepkin, I don't feel like I have that same clear line of reasoning, because, like, why the ocean? Like, why specifically aqua theme? It's very interesting to me because, like, Teclis wasn't hunting them anymore. They ran away. Teclis was like, I should kill them. They might be a problem. To which his brother Tyrion responded, bro, it's all going to work itself out. You just got to chill, dude. Let him live. Which was like, first of all, a dick response, because he's basically just saying it's someone else's problem now. He resulted in the deaths of thousands of people because the Deepkin, even though they're good guys, come in and steal souls. So, Tyrion's not great either. But, they could have just as easily hidden in the woods and been Wood Elves 2.0. Or, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing about the ocean that is so specific to them. And I think that's really interesting that they went that way. With the KO, I felt like, yes, I am following one path of survival, and, those Dwarden just doubled down on it. Where the Deepkin, I feel like they wanted Sea Elves as a design team, and they were like, hey, writers, make this work, because I want to have an elf riding a shark named Bruce. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, I guess we can write that in. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. Like, the two teams were not in sync about this. I don't know why. I want to say that, but I also want to say that I love the Deepkin. Like, I like how they fit into the overall narrative of the gods, right? I'll say more when we learn more about Teclis. Like, the more I like them. When we learn about the story of these elven gods plus Marathi all taking the souls from Slaanesh and trying to construct things, I love the idea that there was a failed experiment. Like, that elevator pitch just gets me. I'm like, hell yeah. You know what I mean? That is the coolest thinking thing ever. But and then when they were launched, they kind of seemed like a weird offshoot because we didn't know a whole lot about Teclis and Tyrion. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay. But the more we've learned about Teclis himself, I don't know. I feel like we've learn more about it. And so I got some comments here in the chat saying, thank you so much, Morty and Hector, all you guys who have said it. The ocean gives them the same numbing isolation that lets them momentarily forget Slaanesh's touch. And that is important. What I mean, I'm more talking about, I'm sorry, I should have clarified this. I'm more talking about from the people who designed the models, because Games Workshop has said repeatedly, that the model makers design the thing and then everybody else kind of works around them. And that's cool. They're a model making company. That's what they do. They also write some cool narrative stuff that I like, but they make the models first. And so I was more just thinking like, why choose the sea as at the start of the project? And then, yes, I do believe that they wrote around that and gave them compelling reasons for choosing the ocean. I'm not saying that it's like, this is out of nowhere and it's totally stupid. I'm not saying that at all. They wrote them in. I was more just curious as to like, but why fish elves now? Like, when we're staring at the barrel of different ways of factions can survive, cataclysmic events. It just struck me as I didn't have that same line of reasoning. And so I don't know. That's a personal opinion. Again, all these are personal opinions, but, yeah. Yes, the more we've learned from Teclis and Lumineth as well, Soulbound, they get more interesting. And I think that's the key. When Deepkin came out, I was like, this is really cool, but it seems very like isolated. Like, they don't really interact with a lot of factions, even within their own battle tome. But the minute we started learning more about Teclis and the Realm Lords and, who are the non-failed version of what the Deepkin should have been, and that contrast just gets deeper, I just love it. Like, you know what I mean? I've grown to love Deepkin so much more as the lore of the bigger universe and setting has developed. And I can't stress that enough, that I really do like them. Now, as far as, this whole question of like successful, are they a successful departure from elves from the old world? Yes, they made it a distinguished intellectual property and added design space. Absolutely love it. They are a huge departure. There's a few icons and runes and name drops like Mathlon, that kind of stuff, to the old world stuff. And I like that it's subtle, because the point at which they ran away from Teclis, he was trying really hard to teach them all of these lessons and this history of the old world. So they have a fraction of that knowledge, and it's probably become tradition for them. But since they set off on their own course, they needed to make their own culture, their own traditions. And so I think it makes perfect sense that we see some references to old world stuff, but largely not. I think that makes absolute sense. The Deepkin novel, Court of the Blind King, makes a ton of mentions of Slanesh's effect on the Idoneth psyche and how they really feel deep down. I did start reading that, and then COVID round 2 hit Seattle, and I've been sleeping or making videos or working ever since then. So I promise we'll do a deep dive onto that book. I really do. Let's see. Okay, I think that's about it. So that is all my thoughts. I think the Deepkin, I'm going to say, just to kind of sum up, do a bit of a sum up here at the end. I think they did a great job on the whole, as far as taking old world stuff and making it new and full of life. I think the biggest winners from that discussion are Fire Slayers and Daughters of Cain, if I'm just giving my personal opinion, in terms of melding old aesthetics that people, they know and they were invested in, and creating a whole new fantasy world around them, and that they really, really do fit into. And so I really do appreciate those two factions in particular. The Keragen Overlords and the Deepkin serve as stark contrasts to the old world. And I appreciate that too, to be honest with you, of saying bold new directions. There are some lore-wise a lot of connections to the old stuff. You guys mentioned the Deepkin's relationship with Slaanesh, which is an old thing, because elves in the old world were all about she who thirsts and that kind of stuff. And so kind of like, at least the dark elves and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a lot of great ties and relationships between those things, but also they charted wildly new directions. And those are awesome. The one that's kind of in the middle in my mind, as far as like, I don't really know what to think about it, is Lumineth Realmlords, because they are intended carbon copies of High Elves, because that's what Teclis wanted. And so you have that, and I'm like, okay, I'm on board, 10,000%. And it's like, hey, Doug, we know you're on board. Also, here's a mountain cow. What? You know what I mean? Where it's kind of, I felt like what they wanted of the core of the army was to be High Elves, and then they were like, that's not weird enough. And they're just going to bolt on the Alarith. And the way that the book is set up is so that other disciplines can be added on. So the Alarith are disciplined to be in commune with the mountain. But they could, in the story, or in the battle tome, they do make references to being in communion with the moon, or a water, like a riverway is a specific example given out. Like, what are those going to look like? It's interesting because, like, I think about that, like, well, what does a water-based Lumineth Realmlord look like? It looks like a friggin' Deepkin. I'm like, what are you talking about? You already did this. So, I don't know. I just thought that was really stinking funny. All in all, I think they're all awesome factions. Now that they all have second edition type battle tomes, except for Deepkin, but even them, I think their lore has been fleshed out by everything going on around them. Lumineth Realmlords, stuff on Teclis, that kind of deal. I do believe that we're in a really good place with all these factions in terms of they have concrete lore, they fit into the universe, there's a reason why they are the way they are, and that new aesthetic and type is copyrightable by Games Workshop to keep them in business, and it is also new design space. I think they all achieve those two goals just in very differing ways. So, now that you guys have had some time to throw your ideas in the chat here, we got a lot of Kraken references. I would love a Kraken. Are you kidding me? I would nurgle the heck out of that, because that's what, what's his name? Big Chungus. Gutrop Spoom. That's what his ship is. It's built into a Kraken. Anyway, friends, I am going to hop off here pretty soon. So if you have any closing thoughts or questions you'd like to share, I do open it up here at the end. I'll just do like 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A, and I got to hop off. I'm actually doing another interview for another YouTube channel, but I will have more details on that later because I don't know when they're actually going to air it. So go ahead, fire when ready. Give me your questions here. I'm just going to be staring aimlessly at the Horticulus Slimix sprue. Trying to understand how I did not have this guy earlier, because this guy's shell is just awesome looking. Thanks for chatting today. Oh, absolutely. Thank you all so much, everyone. Like I said, last call for questions and comments. Love to hear your thoughts. John Barmore, I hope we addressed your question, friends. Sorry, I'm still on Duarden thoughts. Where is Valea? They have never mentioned her in AOS, to my knowledge. I actually didn't even learn that much about her until I was researching Old World Dwarves, and I was like, I've heard this name before, but I had no context for it. And yeah, and she sounds super cool. I would love to see Valea come back in some fashion. I think the Old World story was she was in love with both Grimnir and Grugni. It was at least what this said. That might have been, it was a very old RPG thing that I found. So that might have changed later, but I obviously think that in today's climate, that would probably not be something that they would reprint. So they would have to give her some new context. But I'm here for it. I'm open for it. Question: do they need to add more models to their unique factions? I would like to see more models added to Deepkin and Carrigan Overlords. Yeah, well, and Fire Slayers. I want a Fire Slayer unit that's not a naked baby plus weapon. That's all I want. I just want something different. I don't know what it would look like. Maybe it's like a dwarf engulfed in flames and he's like a suicider running in as his runes are flaring out. I don't know. Again, Games Workshop, take that idea, run with it. You know where I live. Check in the mail. Question: what do you think Marathi is hiding in her domain? I think she's hiding her own ascent to godhood. Question: do you think Marathi will achieve godhood by the end of the Soul Wars? How old is their battle tome? Yeah. I don't know, but I'd like to. I think that would be a cool story arc for her, to be honest with you. If nothing else, it would define godhood for us, and that's something that I want. Question: could you see Storm host specific favored units later down the road? Ooh. I'm going to level with you. I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because I think when they make a unit, they want everyone and their mother to buy it. The only things that are specific to a Storm host are like hero models, and I just don't see them doing units. But, I'm wrong about a lot of things every day, and hopefully this is one of them. I would love to see like a unit of, I don't know, some faith-specific thing for Hallowed Knights, or some animal hunting specific thing for Astral Templars, all that kind of stuff. So, question: has the White Dwarf crossed over from the Old World yet? Oh, Grombrindle? I guess technically, I think in that first year of AOS, they had him as a model. I think technically. Left field question: do you think we'll ever see Forge World made only faction in AOS like Deathcore? Do you think we will ever see a Forge World made only faction in AOS? Forge World has factions. They have Chaos Dwarves, Firmir, and Tomarkin's Horde for a bit, and then they got rid of Tomarkin, so I don't know. Do you think that Tomarkin Maggot Lord will return one day? Dude, I can't imagine what he would look like if they designed him with today's technology. He would be incredible looking. Like, You know, the reason I held off on getting Don working, because there's a few times that I've hovered over the buy button on Forge World for him, and I was like, but the sculpt doesn't hold up as much as I'd like. Like, he looks, some parts of that model from Forge World looked pretty rough compared to what we have now. I'm sure when it was released, it was like super groundbreaking, and I have no doubt about that. And I think it is a great model. But in terms of, I don't like resin first off, but then just some of the edges were a little too sharp for me and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just didn't care for it. But I would love for him to make a comeback. That would be sweet. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think that's about it. Question: what do you think Alariel is hiding with the memory wipe? Interesting note is, I just give a cursive glance to the new Sylvaneth Battle Tome, and I couldn't find much that mentioned that. The first Sylvaneth Battle Tome had a big scene about it, but not the second one. So I don't know. I don't know if they're kind of pulling that back a little bit. I don't know what's going on there. Do you ever think we'll get a Sigmar model? I don't think so. I think the idea is that he has he's not put down his hammer. He gave it to Celestin Prime, and now he is, he's growing as a person, and he's trying to like temper his anger, and so now he leads from the back instead of being an angry warrior god. Yeah, that's what I would think. I don't really think that we're gonna see a Sigmar model. At least I don't really want to. But I don't really like. I mean, I feel like Nagash and Alariel. What's another god that's on the table? Teclis. They don't. I don't know. The fact that you can kill Nagash in the game breaks my immersion. Where I'm like, oh, you mean Jack's, Stormcast BS dropped down from the sky and killed the god of undeath turn 1? Nah. You know what I mean? It just kind of breaks it for me. I'm like, that doesn't represent, but you can't actually represent the power of a full deity because it would just be auto win. So to me, it's like, just skip them. So anyway, that's a personal opinion. Like, Alariel doesn't feel like the goddess of life, because if she did, she would just like turn the entire board into one giant Sylvaneth wood, and they can teleport wherever they want. And she's like, she coughs and 10,000 Sylvaneth blossom into existence. Like in the story, when she's charging a fortress, it looks rad as heck. That's exactly what she's doing. Anyway. Question: do you think we'll ever see stuff for Firmir? I have no idea, and I don't think so. But whatever. All right, friends, I'm gonna go ahead and close out the show. Thank you all so much for joining me. It was a lot of fun today. I like this new Friday format where I have kind of a topic in mind. Thank you again to all my patrons over on Patreon and people who support me here on YouTube. It is life-changing stuff, and it means the world to me. You all are awesome, and I look forward to talking to you again next Friday, same time, 10:30 my time. So wherever you are, deduct an hour and a half. That's when I want to start. And I will see you then. Thank you all, and happy wargaming.